Ever since the show's inception in 1963, the Fourth Doctor is still arguably the most iconic thing of Doctor Who, with only the Daleks and the TARDIS possibly beating him. With this incarnation of the Doctor turning 50 at the end of last year, I thought it would be a good idea to looking back at Tom Baker's first year as the Time Lord in Season 12, starting with the story Robot, airing in 4 parts between the 28th of December 1974 to the 18th of January 1975. This story is written by Terrance Dicks and directed by Christopher Barry. Now, Robot is an interesting story to start off at, as it is the only Fourth Doctor story to be produced by Barry Letts, which was to help the next producer, Philip Hinchcliffe, transition to the role. This has caused fans to argue that this story is very much like a Third Doctor one, with the only difference being Tom Baker is playing the Doctor. However, it was also the first story to have Robert Holmes as script editor, starting his amazing run until Image of the Fendahl in Season 15. Now, the story opens with a new title sequence, which is quite similar to the Season 11 one, but this time the TARDIS replaces the full body shot of John Pertwee, being the first time the TARDIS was in the intro. And a headshot of Tom Baker is also included, making this the most used title sequence in the entire show's history. But moving back to the story, it starts with the very end of the previous story, Planet of the Spiders, with the Third Doctor's regeneration into the Fourth. Now let's talk about Tom Baker, who at the time was a bricklayer at a construction site in a depressed state as he couldn't secure many roles. Barry Letts found him after seeing his performance in The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, which impressed him so much he casted him as the Doctor following John Pertwee. Now before I dive deeper into Baker's performance in the serial, I want to cover some things over really quickly. Really early in the story, the Brigadier, played by Nicholas Courtney, introduces us to Surgeon Lieutenant Harry Sullivan, played by Ian Marter, to take the Doctor to the sickbay, post-regenerating. Harry eventually becomes the new companion to join with the Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith, played by Elizabeth Sladen. With him being first mentioned in the previous story by the Brigadier, Harry was originally going to do most of the heavy lifting in the stories, very similar to Ian Chesterton for the first Doctor. But this idea was quickly abandoned when Tom Baker was cast in the role, meaning that he is only really around for one season, and this could sometimes cause him to not do very much, and is not very memorable in the broader scope of the show. Despite these faults, I still really enjoy him very much as the character, but he doesn't do very much in the serial, and I'll explain why later. So after this, we get to see the aforementioned Robot from the title, which is mostly shown in first-person POV shots, or from shadows in this first episode, which builds tension to the cliffhanger, which is it being fully revealed. It is later revealed that this robot's name is the experimental prototype robot K1, which I'm just going to call K1 for the rest of this review. But anyway, for the time, this is a really cool looking costume, which is added to being performed excellently by Michael Kilgareth. K1 is stealing plans and eventually parts for the top secret disintegrator gun, which is some crazy gun that can melt literally anything. K1 is built by the crazy Professor J.P. Kettlewell of the National Institute of Advanced Scientific Research, or Think Tank for short, to help them for their cause. Now, Sarah Jane Smith investigates Think Tank in episode 1, where she meets the director, Hilda Winters, and her assistant, Arnold Jellicoe, whom she mistakes Jellicoe for the director of the Institute.
Hello. You know, it's awfully good of you to allow this visit, Director.
I hadn't expected male chauvinist attitudes from you, Miss Smith.
I'm sorry?
I'm the director.
Now, having a female villain for the story is quite clever, and also very ahead of its time, as the majority of villains who owned companies usually were male with female assistants. Winters is a very cool villain for the story, as she is mostly calm and coordinated, but sometimes she raises her voice and it's very commanding. Backtracking to the Doctor for a second, we see him sneak out and try to get back into the TARDIS, but he is eventually caught by Harry, and this causes some silly moments to happen. Now, there are many things the Doctor does in this episode which can be seen as silly. For example, karate chopping a brick, then running on the spot, using a wire as a skipping rope, and then he skips with Harry while singing, to tying Harry in a cupboard with that same wire upside down, to him typing on a typewriter very fast in episode 3, just to name a few. But there is at least a very iconic and amazing dialogue exchange made by these two.
Not fit. I'm the Doctor.
No, Doctor. I'm the Doctor, and I say that you're not fit.
You may be a doctor, but I'm the Doctor. The definite article, you might say.
Eventually, we see the Doctor try on clothes in the TARDIS, which he comes out wearing a Viking outfit, then a playing card outfit, then a clown outfit, even with eye makeup, to his iconic bohemian outfit, with the brown fedora, the red coat, and the extremely long scarf. The Fourth Doctor easily carries the story in every scene he is simply amazing. And what I find even more amazing is that Tom Baker is so comfortable in the role and clicks instantly. He just has a strange charisma that only applies to him that makes him feel so alien, yet so human at the same time. Like the way he tries to talk to people and figures out things is so timeless, and is what really makes his performance so good and memorable. Like, he just sometimes makes jokes in a serious situations, or mindlessly rambles to himself, or he constructs whatever the hell this thing is in episode 2. But it is a bit strange seeing him drive Bessie, as that is usually something I can only picture Pertwee driving. However, a highlight of him in this story is when he confronts K1 in the episode 2 cliffhanger, the way he tries to outsmart the clunky robot by trying to make it trip, or blinding it. Another highlight is when he takes out a guard in episode 3 with a scarf, but the way he takes him out makes me question if he actually intended to take him out, or he just tripped over an accident. For the first half of the story, the Doctor and Unit are investigating recent break-ins thanks to K1, which is where we spend quite a lot of time with our Unit regulars, as the B-plot is mainly with Sarah Jane. I find it quite unfortunate that this is only one of 2 televised stories which the Brigadier and this incarnation of the Doctor interact, because I find them together really fun and it is less of them just shouting at each other, and is more of them investigating and finding a common conclusion. With Benton, we find out that he's been promoted to warrant officer, and it really shows just how great of a soldier he is and how much Unit needs him. But other than that, he doesn't do that much here and just spends quite a lot of time just shooting at K1. With Harry, he again doesn't do much, because he spends most of episodes 2 and 3 undercover at Think Tank, but he doesn't do anything and gets caught almost immediately. Speaking of Think Tank, we see the rest of the first half with Sarah Jane Smith, as she investigates Think Tank, leading to the episode 1 cliffhanger of her being cornered by K1. Now, eventually Winters and Jellicoe show up and they begin to show a practical demonstration that K1 is peaceful to human race, by ordering the robot to kill Sarah Jane. As this directly disobeys its prime directive of helping the human race, it gets really confused and this leads to Sarah pitying K1 and trying to help it calm down. We eventually learn that Winters knew this from the start, and then she kicks her out of the building. Now, I don't know how obvious it is, but this is quite stupid of Winters, as doing this towards Sarah can just have her get arrested for attempted murder. Also, in this escapade, this starts the idea of K1 having affection towards Sarah, and it caring for her, as she's the only one besides Kettlewell to care for it. After this, Sarah decides to investigate the SRS, or the Scientific Reform Society, who is a political group who hates the current regime at the time, and wants things to change, to benefit science. And also, many members of Think Tank, including Winters and Jellicoe, are members of it. This leads to Sarah trying to join with the person at the front desk, eventually being rejected, so she decides to roast them back.
I do hope you'll include us in your article. We have been sadly misrepresented.
Really? Well, we're covering a number of fringe organisations, and I'm sure we'll find a place for you. Somewhere between the Flying Saucer people and the Flat Earthers.
After this, Sarah begins to spend quite a lot of time with Professor Kettlewell, who claims he has nothing to do with Think Tank anymore, and doesn't associate with them. We also learn that he has invented 2 other things, living metal and a metal virus, which isn't important until later. In part 3, we see K1 break into Cabinet Minister Joseph Chambers' wall safe with the disintegrator gun, where it steals nuclear codes of the biggest 3 superpowers, being Russia, China, and the US. Now, I get this is a fictional show that tried to convey a possibly realistic future, with a unified task force that stops global threats, but this is a little too ambitious, as these 3 superpowers giving away their launch codes to the UK for it to be permanently placed in a so-called unbreakable vault is quite funny to me. After this, Sarah decides to hide herself in an SRS meeting with Kettlewell smuggling her in, because he once joined and didn't really like them, but we later find out this is a complete lie, as it's revealed that Kettlewell was working for Think Tank the entire time. But this twist doesn't really work, as Kettlewell acts suspicious throughout the entire story, and after this twist, he just doesn't change and is still quite timid and passive in the story. So at the SRS meeting, K1 is unraveled and goes directly towards Sarah, who is hiding just out of sight. But the Doctor jumps on stage and distracts everyone, where this beautiful scene happens featuring a 10,000 IQ guard.
Now for my next trick, I shall require the assistance of a member of the audience.
I don't know what this guard's plan was, but it clearly just didn't work out. While all the think tank people are escaping from the recently arrived unit, while having Sarah as a hostage, you can clearly see Jellicoe help K1 down the stairs, so it doesn't trip over. Anyway, this is where we catch up with Harry, and like I said, he gets caught instantly, but he reveals that everyone has moved to a secret bunker so they can hold out their plans. At the entrance, there's a machine gun that can shoot people when people are close proximity, and landmines that the Doctor reveals using a sonic screwdriver. I just want to say, the idea of the Sonic having a removable head so it can activate mines, and then with the head on it can open doors, is cool on paper, but is extremely unpractical, and I'm pretty sure it isn't used again. Eventually, K1 emerges and starts to shoot the disintegrator gun at unit soldiers and an obvious toy tank for the cliffhanger. Now, I really enjoy the story up to here, but part 4 just sort of falls apart, as there's a natural conclusion a quarter through the final episode. Basically, Winters activates this 300-second doomsday counter, which counts down to nuclear codes being publicly released, unless she gets what she wants, which isn't really explained. Then we see Kettlewell come outside and get accidentally shot by K1, and no one really cares besides the robot. And the Doctor just hacks the doomsday counter and ends the countdown, leading to Winters and Jellicoe arrested, which is also the last we see of them in this entire story. So now the remaining 15 minutes of the story, we have to focus on weird things, because we see Harry and the Doctor go to Kettlewell's lab so that they can destroy K1 once and for all. And speaking of K1, it is having an existential crisis as it just killed their creator, and decides to bring Sarah with it outside to cause mayhem. This causes the Brigadier to rightfully shoot K1 with the disintegrator gun, but this time it grows to the size of a giant. Now, 3 things to mention. Firstly, I believe the Brigadier is right for doing this, and the Doctor basically calls him an idiot when he returns, but he is completely just for what he did, and there is no evidence of it making things grow. Secondly, it makes no sense it would grow as we see, as a disintegrator gun should just be able to destroy it. But the only logical conclusion is that since K1 is made of living metal, it grows from the blast, and that still doesn't explain how Professor Kettlewell somehow created a substance that can react differently towards the ray of a disintegrator gun. Doesn't matter, because finally the effect of K1 growing has aged very poorly, and the CSO background just reflected off his legs, causing K1 just to have invisible legs for a few frames. Now, this is where the story just crumbles for me, as it now just becomes a King Kong parody, as the robot grabs Sarah Jane and puts her on a rooftop, unit soldiers just shooting at it as it just stomps through the streets. And then the Doctor just shows up with his Deus Ex Machina metal virus and then throws it on K1, causing it to melt into a puddle. For the ending of the story, I am happy that Sarah has some remorse over K1's destruction, which concludes their character arc. And we also see the 4th Doctor offer her a jelly baby to cheer her up. Now, despite being the very first jelly baby moment of the 4th Doctor, it isn't the first time the Doctor has had jelly babies and offering them to people, as it originated with Patrick Troughton's 2nd Doctor. But anyway, in this scene, we get another amazing iconic line from the Doctor, being,
Doctor, you're being childish.
Well, of course I am. There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes.
This is just another reason why Tom Baker's performance is just so perfect for the role. We also see Harry join in with the conversation, with him being invited on the TARDIS and agreeing to join.
Oh, I say.
It is a shame that we only hear his reaction and never actually see him inside, as we don't actually see the interior at all this season, and we don't see it until Planet of Evil, which is after Harry leaves. The story ends with the 3 hopping aboard and dematerializing for the Brigadier to witness it. Now, here's some final thoughts on this story. Personally, I think it's a splendid introduction to the 4th Doctor, and works really well as a transition story from the 3rd Doctor era to the 4th Doctor era. Like I said before, the story does crumble apart in part 4, and it can be quite silly in a few scenes, but with having an amazing robot costume, to a fairly modern main villain, to having great comedic moments, and also introducing the 4th Doctor and Harry Sullivan to the world of Doctor Who, I highly recommend you guys to watch this serial, as it is quite fun, and that's why I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching.